Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETchat, the UK's #1 veterinary podcast, and also one of the top podcasts veterinary throughout the world. I'm really pleased and excited to be able to tell you that we've got James Gold on the podcast with me today. James is the head of growth at Modeus. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Modeus is and what it does, because it's a really interesting story, James. But I think, first of all, great to have you on. As you've said, not a vet yourself. You've come from an interesting background of charities and pharmacy. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about your backstory, and then we'll talk a bit more about Modeus.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Anthony, look, I'm honoured to be on the podcast, and obviously loving what you guys are doing at the Webinar Vet. So well done to you. Calling in from Melbourne, Australia here, where it's just gone 6:30 in the evening, so it's a little bit dark. But I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Yes, I am head of growth at Modeus. Prior to that, I've had various sales and marketing based roles over my time before joining Modeus. Pharmacy, my father's a pharmacist. He's not practicing anymore, but I did used to work in his pharmacy growing up. And it's funny how things happen, because when I joined Modeus, we were back then, which was January 2014. That was the sole industry that we were in, is the pharmacy industry. So we supplied software to the pharmacy industry. Fast forward 11 years, we're doing a lot more than that. But that was our sort of core business when I joined. So yeah.
And I think it's funny how you can find yourself back in those situations that you're familiar with. You'd obviously helped your dad probably in his pharmacy as a young lad, so you understood the structures and maybe some of the frustrations he had. Similarly, with myself as a vet, being aware of the problems of trying to do your CPD, your CE yes. in an easy fashion. And of course, it was all very, can I call it analog in those days? We used to have to go off to conferences, etc.
Yes.
Nothing was digital. And of course, one of the great tools that you've created is your S8 tool, which is very much what Modeus is built around, isn't it? If you've got to find pieces of paper and things, and you're being ordered to have something on a disk or on the cloud now, it makes life so much easier for the vets, for the nurses, for everybody in the practice, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And you mentioned the S8 tool. So for those in Australia, they would be familiar with S8. S8 means Schedule 8, which is the class of drug that is a controlled drug. I think in the UK and the US it might be Schedule 2, but we are known for controlled drug management software. Yeah. So we actually started off in Australia in the pharmacy industry, and we really are very, very well known in retail pharmacy. So we're ubiquitous across the country. And then we entered the veterinary industry. So we started the company in 2003, predominantly servicing the pharmacy market with controlled drug register software. And then it wasn't until 2015 when we developed VetS8, which is a controlled drug register specifically for the veterinary industry, that I started to get to know the vet industry. And it is a funny story, actually. Our pharmacy platform, which is called DDBook, it was so popular that vets started to get wind of it, and they started downloading the platform thinking they could use it. But obviously vets have different workflows to pharmacists. So we had to create another product specifically for them, and that's how VetS8 was born.
And of course, it's such a massively important area, not only just from the digital perspective of getting it right and making life easier for, busy vets, busy pharmacists, people who are well trusted within the community. But of course, that trust can go if suddenly drugs go missing, etc. Or, drugs are given at wrong doses and things. So having that sort of information all together must make it much easier to prevent sort of the fraudulent use and the other things that can unfortunately happen in any business, I guess.
Yeah, you're 100% right there, Anthony. The issue with controlled drugs is a global issue, and it doesn't really matter what industry you transact controlled drugs in, whether it's pharmacy or veterinary or aged care hospital, there are the same sorts of issues because controlled drugs are very powerful and they're prone to medication, misappropriation and fraud. The paper registers, the paper logbooks that have been traditionally used to record the transactions of those controlled drugs, they're just, they're not suitable for the 21st century.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the issues that are associated with those paper registers, if you're still using them, they can really, really, hurt a vet clinic or a pharmacy. You can easily rub out or erase things to mask drug theft. You forget to write in the entries, errors with the counting, the manual counting of the medications. Yeah. So they're real issues. And our system goes well beyond that to really just have an intelligent platform that goes well beyond paper recording. We've got things like real-time alerts that can notify the head veterinarian in real time if someone's adjusted the stock or if there is a discrepancy in the stock. So what previously became a nuisance, an issue, now is a joy for a lot of veterinarians in terms of the management of their controlled drug transactions.
And I think you mentioned it there. Those of a certain age will remember the very enjoyable and famous sitcom Friends. And of course, recently there's been a lot of news about poor old Matthew Perry, who was overdosed with ketamine. Obviously, people being able to misappropriate that drug. So it's obviously a huge problem. We know there's a problem with depression. Unfortunately, sometimes even suicide in the profession, and sometimes those stories that, unfortunately, there's drugs that they've actually acquired from the surgery as well. So there's almost a duty of care that practices have to be really, really spot on with all of this controlled drug registration and obviously watching that workflow as well.
100%. And you hit the nail on the head with ketamine is known as one of those drugs that can go missing, unfortunately. It's prevalent in terms of misuse globally. Another one that more recently has become a big issue, especially in the USA, is a drug called xylazine. And you probably would have heard of the fentanyl crisis over there. Well, unfortunately, what's happening is drug cartels are mixing xylazine with fentanyl to give the drug users a quicker high or a faster high. So xylazine is tending to go missing in a lot of US clinics. And so that's become a real issue as well. So you've got controlled drugs, you've got a paper register to track them. You can manipulate the paper register. So it really becomes an issue. So it really becomes around safeguarding the health and safety of the staff within the organisation. It's a bigger issue than just trying to get your register in order and accurate. There's a health and safety issue to it as well.
Being able to acquire a bottle of xylazine or ketamine and then sell it is, of course, it's a very lucrative, albeit a very unethical market.
Yes, absolutely. So, and we've got a lot of, in our software, as mentioned, there's a lot of intelligent functions that can really assist with reducing drug diversion. We never say we can totally eliminate it, because if there are individuals who are hell-bent on stealing, they probably will do regardless of what vessel you use to track and monitor controlled drugs. But with our system, it's highly likely they'll get caught.
They'll get caught, exactly.
Yeah, there's an audit trail for everything. You can't edit or delete any of the entries with the paper registers you can. So it really tightens up the regulatory environment within the vet practice.
I suppose the issue is you've got the controlled drugs software, but you obviously also need to have that integrated with your software management tool, because if I'm ordering xylazine and ketamine from my wholesaler, but somehow that's not also being pulled across to your thing, or there's a way of circumnavigating that, then presumably your tool is also compliant with a lot of the major PMS tools.
Yes, that's exactly right. Integration is really what what the clinics love, and we integrate. VetS8 integrates with a lot of very popular vet practice management systems across the globe. From EasyVet to Covetrus products, RX Works and Vision in Australia, or Avimark and Impromed and Pulse, and then Cornerstone, and there's a whole host
Cloud,
of others.
I think, is a big one in Europe and the UK. ProVet.
Yeah, yep. Merlin, ProVet Cloud there too that we've recently done. We're currently doing RoboVet. So we'd love to integrate with all of them, and I think we've probably got 80 to 90% of the major platforms globally covered. But there's still a few more we'd love to get integrated. And what it does, as you correctly pointed out, it eliminates that double entry. So when they're doing a procedure, for example, and they bill out a controlled substance on their logs, I've given Fluffy the cat, 0.2 mil of morphine or whatever it is, the data then gets sent across to VetS8, and it's very easy for the veterinarian to just basically double-click on the entry, put in their password, process it, and likewise with receiving in the controlled drugs into the clinic, that can be automated through integration as well.
Just trying, with my own practice to manage drugs and manage inventory. Obviously, there was a potential for a lot of waste, also theft of wormers, flea treatments, etc., not just controlled drugs. So making it so it's not down, because also human error comes into it, whereas computers on the whole, are less likely to make mistakes on what is often a bit of a boring task. Okay, I've just given, 0.2 of ketamine to this cat for the castrate. I've now got to go over to the, the book and fill that in. Well, I'm in the middle of the cat castrate, so that takes my priority. Then another cat comes in, and suddenly, how many did we have in today at the end of the day? And do you know what? I just want to get home. So inevitably, it doesn't get done, even if it's being done for innocent reasons. Things can get forgotten. So again, it's so important for vets to think of themselves as digital businesses. And the more you can use digital tools, the more time it saves you, which inevitably means you don't have to bring somebody in to help you with that who may forget to do it anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. And it is a huge time saver. And we are continually adding functionality as well. In the US, we've just added PMP reporting, which is prescription monitoring for those states that require the take-home supply, or when you give the owner of an animal a take-home supply of a controlled substance, you've got to report that to the DEA. And some states have to do it daily, some at the end of the week. And I was speaking to a veterinarian in California, and she was thanking me, saying, you've literally saved about 4 hours out of my week. Yeah. And on a Friday, she used to do it. And she's like, now I can go home early to my family rather than stay back. And it's not just that. It's just the day-to-day of transactions that eliminates that double entry of having to do it in your vet practice system and then do it again in your book. If we can eliminate that gives them back time.
Well,
to then focus
it saves
on
huge amounts of time.
Absolutely.
And of course, then if you do have an inspection from the Royal College or the Australian equivalent or the American equivalent, you're not scrabbling around finding things, because it should be quite easy for them to go in, have a look, and they can see that things are being done in the proper way. And it is massively important to do it in the proper way for all the things that we just discussed.
Absolutely, and you'll find that when in Australia it's the health department, or if it's the Home Office in the UK or the RCVS or DEA in the US, what we find is when they do audit clinics that are using VetS8, it becomes really seamless. They can pull up reports, customized reports, very, very quickly. The audits generally take a lot less time because books can be very, very hard to sort of find the source of any discrepancies or things like that. Whereas with our system, it's just seamless, and it really it just gets your house in order. So it's a peace of mind thing as well. That if you're going to get audited, you're using it correctly, you'll be fine.
Well, it's also a bit like with Euthytal, 100 ml bottle comes in, but then obviously you're using 5 mils on a a cat or a small dog, 10 mils on a bigger dog, etc. And sometimes you maybe need to use a bit more because it didn't go so well or whatever. And then you can start seeing discrepancies very easily. Whereas if you actually put in, well, actually, I use 20 mils of Euthytal, you can see that bottle's getting emptied, and there isn't a discrepancy. Or if it's a very tiny one, it's probably within the sort of accepted range.
Yeah, and we've also got in our platform, because you raise a good point, and it's one that we hear about all the time, is the wastage in the syringe, the hub loss.
Yeah.
And it could be a minute amount, like 0.1 of a mil or 0.05 of a mil. But that does add up over time. If you're doing 50 or 100 of the same administration, it might add up to 5 or 10 mil at the end of the time that you have to do your reconciliation. So we actually have built into the system that you can add that a default amount, if it's 0.05 mil of that wastage, that gets added on to every transaction that you do for that particular drug. And that is another time saver, so that they don't have to worry about at the reconciliation time, or how much was used by waste, or how much did I discard. If they sort of know that at the time of administration, or they can put that in, it's just another time saver that the system can provide for.
It's interesting, James, because I think we're on a similar journey in some ways. We've set up the company in 2010. It went global very quickly because, of course, if you've got something that is a digital product, it's on the internet, then people find it, start using it, etc. But we very much looked at how do we internationalize. We're starting to get multi-languages now for the webinars, making sure that we're race accredited for the American system. We have quite a lot of Australian and New Zealand vets. The New Zealand story was actually a really nice one, in that Auckland, the New Zealand Veterinary Association, were running the World Veterinary Association Congress in April 2020. Now, if you can cast your mind back, a little virus turned up at the beginning of that year and kind of kiboshed their conference, which they'd obviously spent a lot of money on, hiring the conference centre and things. And we ended up turning that into a 3-week festival of veterinary learning in sort of April, May time. So we moved really quickly, got a really nice relationship going with NZVA. And of course, a lot of vets in New Zealand now use the platform, and nurses. You're obviously very Australian centric. That's where you're based. We're very UK centric, but I know you have clients in other countries. But if you look at the Australian system, 9 years since you launched Vet S8, what sort of, would you say, is the rough percentage of Australian vets who are still using paper rather than using either your tool, or if there's any other tools out there that do a similar thing?
It's a very good question. Look, we're lucky that we're the only ones in Australia that have a controlled drug register platform specifically for vets. There are other players, but they don't play in the vet market. I honestly, hand on my heart, something I'm very proud to say is that we've changed the industry in Australia. We launched, I think, October 2015. Before that, pretty much 100% of the clinics were using paper to transact on their controlled substances. Now, I know we're well over 1,000 clinics in Australia, so we're probably around 40-45% market share, and we're aiming to have over 80%. There's always laggards and, clinics that just always don't like change, and they'll continue on the paper registers. But we actually are finding that it's really mimicking our success in pharmacy. So pharmacy, we're close to 80% market share. And, we're at the moment, we're in that very strong growth phase in Australia where, we're onboarding probably 5, 6, 7 clinics a week. And that's just consistent. And a lot of it is just through word of mouth. And so in New Zealand, we entered that a couple of years ago, and we've got a good market share there. And, the next frontiers to conquer are hopefully the US and the UK. And that's something that we're very excited to do.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. If you have a good product, the marketing job is so much easier, because actually you don't sell the product. It's the practice, in the next town who says, well, we're using S8 and it's brilliant, and you'd be an idiot if you're not using it. Because you're always going to have laggards. You have the early adopters, and then you have the majority coming in. You're probably always going to, have 20% who won't use it until they're
Yeah,
actually brought over the coals by the Australian Veterinary Association or whoever
that's right.
monitors it and tells them they have to get it, otherwise they lose their license.
It's so true. We actually find it's interesting. We find a lot of it is generational as well. There are a lot of veterinary clinicians or veterinary owners, and they've used paper for 30, 40 years, and they're not going to
Yeah.
change. They're close to retiring, and it's
Yes.
just not something that they want to do. But a lot of the I'd say anyone sort of the younger generation, I mean, they will just totally flat out refuse paper. And if they start in a clinic, they will get the owner to get VETchat because they're not going to be writing out the controlled substances. So we find that we also find it's also transaction volume based. A lot of the clinics that do a lot of controlled substances, they love VETchat because they'll get writer's cramp if they just continue using the book. If there are very small clinics that don't do many controlled substances, they might be still happy to use the book. But what we do find is that our software is very generously priced in terms of the transaction volume.
Yeah.
So if you're a small clinic and you really don't do many controlled substance transactions on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, we've got a price point for you that is very, very attractive. So it really depends on the transaction volumes, and it's we've got a pricing point that's suitable for everyone, and that really helps as well.
I think the profession has been known. I think it's changing a little bit, but it's a conservative profession, as you said, and obviously older people less willing to change. But actually, what was really interesting for ourselves, and we sort of mirror your story, is the pandemic. Suddenly, you had grandparents going on Zoom, and they were saying, have you heard of Zoom before? Well, we've been using it for 6 or 7 years, so yes, I have heard of it. So a lot of people did digitally transform. So, I think people are beginning to see that actually, whether you're a butcher, baker, candlestick maker, pharmacist, or vet, you have to think of yourself more as a digital business with your advertising, the way you book appointments, the way you mark down your controlled drugs, or any of the products that you use in your practice. To go digital makes sense in today's world.
Absolutely. And actually one of the best tools we have for marketing is actually webinars. Like, what we've done, like tutorials on the platform where we actually show them how to use it. And we've got partners, vet practice management partners and other partners, in Australia, and also we're increasingly getting those partners in the UK and the US, where we partner with them, and webinars are a really great way of bringing to a wide audience the platform and be able to demo, to actually show them how it works. And that has really held us in good stead over the years. So I'm 100% with you there, Anthony.
Yeah. One of my bugbears with practice management systems is, the people sell you the system. It's not every company, but my experience has been a lot of them in the veterinary space, and they never really educate people. So people use 5% or 10% of the potential of the site.
Yep.
But they're not then spending the time to really say, well, actually, if you use 50, 60, 70, 80% of the site, you're going to get even more value from it. And so I think it's really good that you've produced a tool, but then you make it easy for people to use it, because actually, if you set it up, but then nobody uses it, after 12 months, they go, well, actually, I'm going back to paper again.
Yeah.
So education is so important as part of the process.
Absolutely. And look, we're lucky. It's a pretty simple system. It's like vet practice management systems obviously cover off everything that the clinic does, from billing to, anesthetics. I mean, anything to do with the vet clinic, it's really integral to their workflows. We just focus on the controlled drug element of that. So because it's just that one element of the vet practice's workflow, it's actually very, very simple to use and learn.
Yeah.
One session of about half an hour and vets are pretty much, and vet nurses or technicians are pretty much proficient in how to use the platform. So we're lucky in that regard. And we have very, very high renewal rate as well. So once they go off paper and they're using it integrated, it's very, very rare they'll go back to paper.
So it sounds like the world is your oyster, James. You've got Australia and should I say the Antipodes sorted. Yes. So we can now expect the Aussie invasion coming over from to the UK and America. And I just hope you're as successful as your Olympic team were. You smashed it in Paris.
We did. Yeah, look, it was a great Olympics, that's for sure. And look, we hope if we're half as successful as the Australian Olympic team, we'll be happy. But look, we are doing, good things in the UK and the US. There are some announcements I would love to make. It's a little bit premature, but stay tuned for some hopefully very big announcements that we have to make in both countries. I'm actually going to the States. Well, I'm going to the London Vet Show in November. So I'm going over to London. So I'll be setting up a few meetings there.
I will see you there, James.
Oh, excellent.
We have a stand. Do you have a stand at London Vet Show?
No. We're not. I'm just going over to just meet with some groups and some clients. But I'll be there, and I'll be actually at the conference as a delegate, so I'll definitely have to say hi to you. And then straight after that, over to the US, we do have a booth, and we're actually well known in Australia in equine veterinary as well, because our platform supports multi-register functionalities for vehicles and trucks if they ever transfer controlled drugs off site. So we're actually going to be exhibiting at an equine conference in Florida, in Orlando, called the AAEP. So, yes, if you're in either the US or the UK, make sure you give me a shout, and I'll come and say hi and talk to you about VETchat.
Brilliant. Well, I'll look forward to seeing you in November, God willing. We will be there as well. And it's been great to speak to you. It's always good to do it face-to-face as well, but technology and digital prowess allows us to do amazing things that we couldn't do 10, 20 years ago. Thanks for all that you're doing, because seriously, it's such an important area for all the reasons we've mentioned. So thank you for all the efforts that you're making, both in pharmacy, but particularly in our case in the veterinary industry.
My pleasure, Anthony, and it's been great to be on the show. Very much appreciate it, and I certainly look forward to catching up with you in November at the London Vet Show.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, James. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Looking forward to seeing you on a webinar or a podcast very soon. Enjoy the rest of the day wherever you are. Take care, and bye-bye.